Alright guys, let's talk about that Apple event. I am fresh off the event. This is the same glass of wine I was drinking while watching the event. So let's go product by product, eh? iPhones. They didn't kick off with new iPhones right off the bat. They announced new colors for two new iPhones. The iPhone 13s and the iPhone 13 Pros now have a brand new green color. So whoever bought Sierra Blue, maybe it's time for another iPhone. I don't know. But there is actually a new iPhone because there is a new iPhone SE. So from what I've seen in the event, it looks quite similar to the old iPhone SE. It's got new colors. I think it's got Midnight and Starlight now, as well as Product Red. The glass has been updated. They're saying it's the same glass you'll find on the iPhone 13 Pros. It also now has 5G. So there's that. The camera's been upgraded. The camera now has Deep Fusion. We first saw Deep Fusion in the iPhone, was it 11s or 12? 11s. In the iPhone 11s. It now has Smart HDR4 and it has photographic styles, which we first saw on the iPhone 13 and 13 Pros. So aside from the iPhone 13 and 13 Pros, this would be the only other iPhone model that has photographic styles. So I was actually low-key hoping that the iPhone SEs would have a slight redesign, but I guess I'm glad they kept it looking like the old iPhone 8, so at least there's still one active iPhone in the lineup that retains the legacy home button design. But performance-wise, compared to the price they're offering it for, absolutely no question that this is the best entry-level iPhone you could possibly find. In fact, the best entry-level phone in that price bubble. And then they threw a curveball. iPad Air. The iPad Air now has the M1 processor. I did not see that coming. I own the M1 iPad Pro, and I thought they would make it exclusive to the iPad Pro line because it's such an incredibly powerful processor to be in an iPad product. And they put it in the iPad Air, so that's so much power in an iPad Air. The iPad Air also has center stage now. The iPad Air has 5G. They're saying the USB Type-C port is 2 times faster, but I don't think it's a Thunderbolt like the iPad Pros. It still supports the Apple Pencil 2nd generation and the Magic Keyboard. So I suppose in terms of physical dimensions, not much has changed. Major difference is the M1 processor, and the camera now has center stage. And of course, they come in new colors. Stunning new colors, I should add. The next announcement is not an end product, but a chip. Now, this one I absolutely did not see coming. M1 Ultra. I'm going to take a sip of my wine. So there was the M1, which was incredible. And then they just shattered the earth with M1 Pro and M1 Max. I'm currently using an M1 Pro as my primary computer now, and that's already too much power for me to harness. Now they have an even bigger, more powerful M1 Ultra. What they've done is they've used this technology they're naming Ultra Fusion to essentially fuse two M1 Maxes together. It's apparently 7 times more transistors than the original M1, and now it goes up to 128 gigabytes of unified RAM. It's got a 20-core CPU, 64-core GPU, 8 times the GPU performance of the original M1, and it's got a media engine that's twice as capable compared to the M1 Max. The media engine are the encoders and decoders that make playing back video, HEVC, and ProRes so fluid and smooth on the M1s, and they've doubled the capability of that. At this rate, it does make me wonder, do you need that much power? At this rate, I kind of think Apple's doing it just because they can. Like, I'm perfectly happy with the Pro. I always imagine every day while using the Pro how much more incredible the Max would be, and then I'll pull myself back. Now, the M1 Max is too much for me. And then now they have something that's essentially twice the power of the M1 Max. It's like, the future's here early. The future's here early. I'm pretty sure there are some really, really hardworking people out there who might actually need all that power. But I would consider myself a pretty intensive Mac user when it comes to video editing. And the M1 Pro is already satisfying my needs so much. So it's honestly a bit difficult for me to imagine how ridiculously insane the M1 Ultra is in terms of power. And ironically, it's so power efficient. They did draw a lot of parallels during the keynote, and compared to PC processors, it is still drawing a huge margin less power. It's an exciting time to be alive as a Mac user right now. Oh, and then they get to the part where they introduce the Mac, which they will ship the M1 Ultra in. And it's a completely new lineup of Macs. It's called the Mac Studio. Now, quite frankly, I think it looks like a Mac Mini on steroids, because it kind of looks like a Mac Mini, except it's quite a bit taller now. On the back, there are 4 Thunderbolt 4 ports. It comes with 10 gigabit Ethernet as standard, I suppose. 2 USB-A ports still. I'm so glad they still kept some of that, because even though we're all onto USB-C now, some of our older accessories are still USB Type-A, and it really helps to not go around looking for one of those Type-C to A adapters. Of course, it has an HDMI, and it has Wi-Fi 6. Now, there are also 2 USB-C ports in front of this. That was a really, really nice touch. If you're on an M1 Max configuration of the Mac Studio, then those are 2 USB Type-Cs. If you're on the M1 Ultra Mac Studio, then those 2 ports are Thunderbolt 4 ports. So you get a total of 6 if you're on the M1 Ultra. Also, there's an SD card reader on the side of it. Now, they did put things into perspective quite well, how insane this thing is in terms of a performance beast. If you have the M1 Ultra configuration, they say it is 80% faster than their top-of-the-line Mac Pro that costs something like a small house, if I'm not mistaken. So you're telling me this little aluminum box that sits on your table has almost twice the power of the top-of-the-line Mac Pro? Wow. You know that giant tower that MKBHD uses? That one? Also, I think they just brought this up to flex. SSD speeds up to 7.4 gigabytes per second. I don't know what to do with that. It can simultaneously play back 18 streams of ProRes 422 8K footage. And surprisingly, the M1 Max version is only $1,999. Sounds kind of like a lot of money, but it's an M1 Max in there. It's actually not too bad. The M1 Ultra is going to cost a bit, $3,999. But then again, there's nothing else like it. I would say for the amount of performance it's offering, that price tag checks out. I absolutely do not think that's overpriced. It's still expensive, but not overpriced. The Mac Studio is launching alongside the Studio Display. The Studio Display is 27 inches, 280 pixels per inch, so it's a 5K display. It's got a maximum brightness of 600 nits. Of course, it has P3 color gamut, True Tone. There is an option to have it in a nano texture finish. And this display has an 813 Bionic inside. 813 Bionic. That is the same processor in the iPhone 11s. Also, the display has a built-in camera and audio system, meaning mics and speakers. The camera, they say, is the same 12 megapixel ultra-wide camera you'll find on the iPad, which makes this the first center stage enabled Mac experience. So you can finally have center stage on a Mac. It's got a 6-speaker sound system with spatial audio, and it's $15.99. So what do I think of this? Well, obviously it's very exciting. It's a 5K Thunderbolt display that has a freaking 813 Bionic inside. Although I was actually expecting this to ship with HDR, at least like a studio display XDR. Maybe that's something to look forward to, but currently the studio display, as far as I'm concerned, is an SDR display. Now, the reason I was expecting it to be HDR enabled is because Apple did kind of set up this trend. All the latest iPhones are HDR ready. The iPad Pros have mini LED HDR. The new MacBooks have mini LED XDR displays. So now that there's a standalone display, I was quite hopeful that it has XDR. I suppose at the moment, if you want a standalone XDR display from Apple, it's still the Pro Display XDR. It would be seriously insane though if they did make an XDR display for $1,600. Maybe next time. So the highlight of today's event is definitely the Mac Studio and the M1 Ultra. They did tease about an upcoming Mac Pro at some point during the event, although no mention of a refresh of the 27-inch iMac though. So I am really curious as to what they're gonna do with that. But M1 Ultra, I did not see that coming. Green new iPhones are coming for anyone who loves the color green and hasn't bought one of the newest iPhones yet. Maybe this is the time. But all in all, if I want to upgrade my workstations in the studio, I guess it's time to start saving up. And I'll see you in the next video. M1 Ultra.